2,600 years ago, a man by the name of Siddhartha Gautama sat under a fig tree for 49 days. When he got up, he claimed to have reached enlightenment and spread his message for the next 45 years through northern India. Today, there are over 470 million followers worldwide of this message. Many of them call themselves Buddhist. The message they follow, Buddhism, and the man under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha. So what is this message? Why is it important? And how does it affect us in our day-to-day lives? Welcome to the NoW podcast. I'm your host, Chris Pike. And today we will look at what that message was, why it's important, and what the implications are in our day-to-day lives. We'll start with the core of the Buddha's message, the Four Noble Truths. In their simplest and most straightforward way, the Four Noble Truths are as follows. Number 1, suffering. Number 2, the cause of suffering. Number 3, the end of suffering. And number 4, the path. Now let's flesh that out a little bit. In this episode, we're going to look at the Four Noble Truths and talk about each one of them so we can have a general understanding of what the core of the Buddha's message was. In the following episodes, we're going to do a deeper dive into each truth one at a time. The first truth, suffering. There is suffering. In life, there is suffering. This is universal. All sentient beings suffer. Suffer is such a strong word. It has so many connotations and thoughts that come up with it. Even as I say the word, in life there is suffering. I say suffer, and immediately there's these thoughts that come into my head about suffering. And in this first truth, there is suffering. It absolutely is referring to some of those. But it's also talking about suffering in a much more subtle sense. If there's suffering in a gross sense, as in, I get my leg cut off, right? Okay? I'm gonna suffer, right? And that's like a gross sense. It's big, it's in your face. But it's also suffering in a subtle sense. Maybe a good way to think about this is when you say suffering, replace it with discontent. So the first truth is also this. In life, there is discontentment. In life, there is suffering, gross, large. In life, there is unsatisfactoriness, subtle, small. But the first truth covers that whole broad spectrum. In life there is suffering. In life there is discontentment. In life there is unsatisfactoriness. All those things are encompassed in the first noble truth. And the reason it's important is because, again, it is universal. And it helps when you acknowledge that universal truth, not just for yourself, but also acknowledging it for others. It manifests compassion. If you can acknowledge that truth for yourself, in life I suffer. In life I am discontent or experience discontentment. In life I experience unsatisfactoriness. If you can see those things as a universal truth, it can help breed compassion. First, compassion for yourself. If you can then recognize that, again, it is among all sentient beings. You know that the person in the car in front of you that you want to flip off, if you can think, they suffer. They experience discontentment. They experience unsatisfactoriness. Just the acknowledgement of that first truth alone is like put you in the right position to manifest compassion and empathy. The second truth, the cause of suffering. Now, when you get into the second truth, really the second, third, and fourth truth, there seems to be more of a distinguishment in what we're talking about when we say suffering. And so there is the gross form of suffering. I used the example earlier of getting my leg cut off. It might not be the best example, but I think it's, a decent one. And it makes me think of Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. What are you gonna do? Bleed on me? I'll bite your legs off. But we're also talking about, like the suffering of old age, sickness, and death. Those were three of the four things that the Buddha encountered when he left the palace. And again, those are just like unavoidable. Like, we are going to get old, we are going to get sick, and we are going to die. And there is no avoiding that kind of suffering. The second truth, the cause of suffering, talks about the more subtle form. It talks about the discontentment, the unsatisfactoriness. And the reason that we suffer is because we don't understand how things are. And because we don't see things how they actually are, we go through this process of clinging and averting. So we cling for things that we want, our good happy days, or things that we think make us happy, and we avert or push away from things that we don't like, that don't feel good, that we just don't want anything to do with them. All that stuff is laid out in the cause of suffering, the second truth. Why is that important? That's like the first place my brain wants to go. If I can accept the first truth, is that suffering in life, there is suffering, be it gross, be it subtle, whatever in life there is suffering. If I can accept that, I want to know why. Why is there suffering? And especially if there's something that I can do about it. Especially if the suffering that I'm causing, that subtle suffering, is coming from me. I want to know why that is. So that's the second truth, the cause of suffering. The third truth, the end of suffering. Now wait a second, I just got done saying that there's some things that we can't end. Like, we're gonna die. We are gonna get sick. We're gonna get old. Those things are just gonna happen. So the end of suffering, go to the more subtle form. Go to the suffering that you can control, the suffering that comes from you. There can be an end for unsatisfactoriness. The term here that the Buddha used was dukkha, which I think is funny and appropriate because it sounds like doo-doo. And that's what unsatisfactoriness feels like sometimes. It's doo-doo, dukkha. But the third truth, the end of suffering, the end of dissatisfaction. And finally, the fourth truth, the path. So let's look at these four truths, and I've heard this before, and I think it's just a great analogy, and I'll just do my spin on it. Look at the four as a diagnosis from a doctor. You have a sickness. Truth 1, there is suffering. It's unavoidable. Truth 2, this is why you are sick. Truth 3, you don't always have to be sick. You can be unsick. And truth 4, this is what you take. This is your medicine. This is how you get unsick. So yeah, look at the four truths as a diagnosis from Dr. Sid. All right, you could say that the Buddha was the doctor of the human condition, or the human experience, whatever. The human condition maybe would be better. And let's look at it this way. In life, there is suffering. There's your diagnosis. In life, there's discontentment. In life, there's unsatisfactoriness. Truth number 2, Hey, there's a reason that this diagnosis is true. There is a reason for suffering, a reason for dissatisfaction, a reason for discontentment. Truth number 3, good news. It doesn't have to be that way. There is an end of suffering. There's an end of suffering attainable in this life. Truth number 4, here's the path to go down, to see the end of suffering. And those are the core of Buddhist philosophy. Those are the 4 noble truths. So think on those this week. Take them one at a time. There is suffering. In life, there is discontentment and unsatisfactoriness. You don't have to wait for some night to chop your leg off to experience that. Just wake up and get out of bed. Does your back hurt? Ooh. Dissatisfaction, discomfort. It's a form of subtle suffering. You don't have to look far at all for the subtle forms of suffering. And so you got the first 2 truths that you can contemplate throughout the week and investigate. You know, you can start to recognize instances of suffering or discontentment or unsatisfactoriness, instances of dukkha in your life, right? And then with that second one, you can start to really try to sit with that and dig deep into it and realize, why is that? What are the causes of this? What am I causing in my own suffering in this? And really sit down and investigate that. But then the 3rd and 4th truth, you can use those as like a tool of encouragement. So as you're like, because you know, sometimes when you start to investigate this stuff and focus on it, it can like, you know, not be the most pleasant thing to like try to shift your awareness to all the different ways you're suffering. You know, and if it does get to be where it's kind of burdensome, use those 3rd and those 4th truths as a way to just contemplate the fact that, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. There are things that I can control within my own self that can lead to the ending of my unsatisfactoriness, that can lead to the ending of my discontentment. I mean, there's a path for that, and millions of people have followed that path, and millions of people have seen the endings of, you know, their suffering in different ways and in different levels. But that is the 4 truths, and that's the way I encourage you to think about it in the upcoming week or weeks, or just in general as you're going through your life. Next week we'll talk, or next episode, we'll talk about the first truth and really kind of delve into that. Suffering. There is suffering in life. There is suffering. There is dukkha. And I'll leave y'all with that. Thanks for listening. And until next time.
Love you guys.